Hey folks, it's X, and I'm here on Friday in the afternoonish time right now. As you guys are seeing this, is the day after Thanksgiving. If anybody wants to date this as far back as it'll go. I didn't have a Friday afternoon segment recorded, so I needed to come down to the studio here. Beautiful Utah Outcast studio in my basement. And, I figured what the hell not. Let's go ahead and do a Answers in Genesis clip that we have out there for AIG News. And it's involving Egyptians and... My God. This is one of the most vapid videos I've had to watch in quite a while. Let's let these three fucking chuckleheads just go ahead and get started then, shall we?
Yeah, you're the engineer.
All right. Yeah, I actually thought this was a really neat one. I don't agree with the date necessarily here, but this 4,500-year-old ramp contraption may have been used to build Egypt's Great Pyramid. And essentially what they found was a type of ramp that they potentially could have used to go up some of the sides of these pyramids to help build this kind of stuff, get some of the big stones up there.
Why would we be surprised at that?
We shouldn't be.
You shouldn't be surprised at that because it's a ramp. It's one of the earliest known technological things that we use as humans to move things from a lower place to a higher place. This is where we're at, folks. We're talking about a Ken Ham being surprised about a ramp. Jesus, man.
And, I know people have proposed this and talked about it for years. It's just fascinating that they actually found
a ramp.
A piece of something like this that could have been used. But, I've looked around, and we still see people using this type of technology. I just found a couple of barn pictures, where people have built ramps to utilize their barn space a little easier or different ways of doing this sort of thing. Sometimes they leave them up.
Yeah, but none of those are 4,500 years old, nor were any of these barns used to hoist giant fucking stones to make a pyramid. Do you not see the apples and oranges comparison that we have here? Yes, it is a ramp. B, they're not old enough for you to care that much about them. And C, they weren't used for the same purposes. We're surprised that they found this ramp. That's great. But it shouldn't be surprising that they used engineering to overcome the... Oh, my God.
They must have been Egyptians.
That's right, boy. Well, there goes the alien idea to build those things. And, I guess people could have used a ramp.
You know what? I put in a picture of Masada. Look at the ramp the Romans built.
Yes.
Yeah.
So people in the past have always been building ramps.
Just so you know, guys, I do have some popcorn. And I'm watching along with you. This is absolutely fucking fascinating on a Christian show to talk about pyramids. Let me just say.
Right, we looked that up. That took about a year, for them to get up there and be able to lay siege to it for a few months.
But it's an intelligent thing to do. And,
really
often they try to characterize ancient man. Like, again, they don't believe man could have built the pyramids. He had to have alien help, right?
No, that's your guys' people that think that God could be an alien. Atheists aren't the ones saying that aliens did it. We're saying that if your God could do something like this, why couldn't it be aliens? Because one's infinitely easier to understand than the other. But you're not going to find a single person on our side of the argument saying, it was the aliens that done it. That's just not happening. And we don't think that early man was stupid. They came up with beer. They have to be fucking brilliant.
He couldn't have just done this, but people are intelligent and they can devise ingenious things to do this because we're not evolved from some sort of ape-like creature. We're created in the image of God. And
those ape-like creatures were pretty smart too. Don't believe me? Just go look at the apes in the zoo. They're fucking clever.
So we have that creativity and that intelligence.
It's interesting that they throw this date out here, 4,500 years old. That would actually be before the flood of Noah's day. So that's a problem, isn't it? I mean, yet we don't see these things being annihilated. And yet on top of that, where we see the pyramids built, they're actually sitting on top of, in many cases, sometimes miles deep of flood sediment.
Yeah, they were built on top of those, newly formed sediment layers that would have been, still kind of squishy if what you guys think is true.
Yeah.
So clearly they're post-flood. In fact, the name Egypt is the Greek name Egyptus for Mitzrayim, Noah's grandson Mitzrayim, which is in the Old Testament. Every time you see Egypt in the Old Testament, you see Mitzrayim as the Hebrew behind it. That's actually one of Noah's grandsons.
I could come up with a story in short time and claim that my use of a certain word was something that I had created in my book of ancient history that we have here that we can't verify on. Noah's Ark hasn't been verified. There's no history that says this thing really happened. We have Sumerian flood myths, we have Babylonian flood myths, and we have Christian flood myths, but guess what? The Christians were originally the Jews, and the Jews were also in what part of the world? Hearing stories being told in Mesopotamian countries? Yeah, that's right. But let's put this another way, guys. Say that this did happen after your flood, and the pyramids were being built at 4500 BC. Were the Jews building it? No, they weren't. They were mostly skilled tradesmen, or sorry, craftsmen. Let's put it that way. It was a blue-collar job. You got treated pretty well for it. They weren't Christian, or I'm sorry, let me go further back because Christ wasn't a thing then. They weren't Jewish slaves at that point. So your whole book of Exodus is completely bullshit. You know, these guys like to stake that if you can't build your foundation on Genesis 1:1, you can't base it on anything. Well, we already know that you can't base your whole fucking world belief on Genesis and still come out smelling like roses. You tend to smell a lot like bullshit. And with this one, it's just even more of your books just being proven absolutely fucking wrong. 4500 BC, if that does put us before the flood, guess what's wrong? Not the history, not the stuff that we could test the date on, not any of the stuff that we can actually be there for. Your book is wrong because it's a bunch of collected stories. And you're hurting people that trust you to sell them this bullshit daily.
So clearly this stuff was built after the flood and they got the dates wrong.
Actually, somebody just commented that they just got your Tower of Babel book.
Oh, yeah.
And they're looking forward... Babel, and they're looking forward to reading it. And you show in there evidence of Noah's grandsons' names that you see are in cultures around the world.
They're all around the world, yeah. It's fascinating. Sometimes people don't even realize it, that they go back to when Noah's sons or grandsons, great-grandsons.
But, by the way, I will say that when you go to the Ark on the third deck, we actually have an exhibit in there about ancient man.
A whole bunch of signs on the wall, right? Because apparently that's all the Ark is. Bunch of signs on walls. Lovely.
Showing that ancient people going back to, we're talking about people after the flood.
After the flood, of course.
Some of these ancient groups were highly intelligent. We don't even know how they built some of the things they did, how they carved the stones.
Well, if you don't have any, good record of how the Ark actually got built, besides the fact that he used gopher wood and made it in the dimensions that you said that he made it in, let's not forget the creative license that you're taking with it, with the weird shit that you put on the Ark facade of that building. I don't think the original Ark would have had that. The best shape for it to have been in, if it was just cast amongst the sea of a flood, would be a round shape. Or at least a party barge shape, Then they could drink and have fun. Maybe do a little bit of fishing. For all the fucking corpses that would be stemming the water. It'd be fucking gross.
So accurately how they did it. Just a reminder that man is highly intelligent. And one of the problems, when people say, how could Noah have built the Ark? They've got an evolutionary view of history.
They used a ram.
Man is intelligent. Ken Ham is a Neanderthal.
So, yeah. Well, he might have too.
He might.
But they've got an evolutionary view of history, thinking people before us aren't as good as us. We've evolved more highly. Actually, the opposite will be true. We've probably degenerated, because of sin, since God made Adam and Eve. But
no, you're not going to get people saying that we become more highly evolved. We just don't have to survive in the same world that our forebears had to survive in. When your kind roamed the earth, Ken, there was still animals that would eat us all the time. I mean, you get that every once in a while with the modern world, but nowhere near as bad as it was. You also didn't get a lot of people freezing to death, starving to death. I mean, never mind. The United States is actually complicit in a lot of people starving to death. Not going to go down that route, but yeah, I mean, Neanderthals were smart because they could survive the area that they were in. We're smart because we can survive the area that we're in currently. It's almost like things change over time. What if there was a word for how things change slowly over time to suit the needs of what's going on in the environment in which they live in?
But
well, the book up here, Unwrapping the Pharaohs, it's an incredible book. It's actually a nice full-color book.
My turds are in full color there, buddy. That doesn't mean they're nice and I want to play with them.
John Ashton John Ashton and David Down were the ones that put it together, and it's just beautiful. But David Down was an Egyptologist, and one of the things that he recognized, I know another Egyptologist, David Roll, both had recognized that the Egyptian dating system had a lot of problems with it. Mm-hmm. And if you guys are familiar with just about anything in archaeology, they're basing this on what's called the Egyptian dates. And those dates can extend all the way back, 10,000 years old. And what they did is they took all the pharaohs.
That's if you take their dates and put them back like that. We, on the other hand, can look in layers of strata. We can look at the age of certain things. We can carbon date to a certain extent, potassium argon date other things, and all sorts of other amazing fucking ways of finding out dates of things. Archaeologists are pretty good at this. Oh, yeah, that's right. You guys don't trust the science unless it suits you. That's right. If we came out with something that said, hey, we found a timber over here from a worldwide flooded boat, and we could date it back to about the time that Noah's Ark was supposed to happen, and it says right here, and it's shaved into the side of it, on Noah's Ark or something like that. You'd be like, see, the science says that it's real. The science says that the flood was real. Fucking hypocrites.
And they took how long they reigned, which was recorded by a man named Manetho, an ancient historian, a few hundred years there away from Christ. And what they did is they just added them one on top of the other. And so that adds this great age up to 10,000 years. But here's the problem. Egypt had 3 kingdoms, a lower, middle, and an upper. So a lot of these guys were reigning at the same time.
One eternity later.
Oh my God, nobody fucking cares.
Mm-hmm. And so what these guys did, like David Down, is they said, well, let's go up there and see who was co-reigning against each other. And it actually brought the chronologies down somewhere in the neighborhood of about 60 years off from, say, Archbishop James Ussher. And so it just gives you an idea that some of these Egyptian dates, which people still throw out there all the time, are just 100% dead wrong.
Yeah, somebody here said, and Bodhi, I'll say something and then you answer this too. Couldn't the pyramids have survived the flood? And what about all the other pyramids around the world?
Good question. What's to knock over giant pyramids? Seriously?
Well, couldn't the pyramids have survived the flood? And the answer would be no, absolutely not. Have you ever seen what a local flood does? The devastation of just a local flood?
Local flood with wood timber structures, with, aluminum can trailers that people are living in, crops, and, stuff that's just, bolted to the ground. We're talking about ginormous fucking stone structures that weigh in the probably millions of tons. And you're thinking that a little bit of water rising is going to somehow cause them to float away? They weren't made out of sponges, dumbass.
There was just a few years ago a local flood just west of the city of Brisbane, mm-hmm. when there was a rainstorm on top of the tableland area, the plateau there. Mm-hmm. And the devastation was horrendous. The water just wiped out an entire town, basically. And
stone structure versus pissy little buildings in Australia. Were the tall buildings still there after that flood? I can almost guarantee they would be, because a lot of those extend way the fuck below the ground.
Deposited all this sediment. I mean, water it's catastrophic. Right. You imagine a global flood, it would scour
it would have obliterated those
it would obliterate the pyramids. In fact, when you go to the Grand Canyon and you see down the bottom where the sediments first started to be formed, and you see the basement rock that's been sheared off by the sheer force of the water and deposited. And then the other thing, as you mentioned earlier,
okay, I'm done. They can't sit here and tell me that our system is right because we can look at the Grand Canyon and see that all this sediment was taken away thanks to a flood. But meanwhile, if you look at both sides of the canyon, you'll have about the same layer of strata on each side, showing that it was something carved away over a long-ass time by steady water coming through, not by a massive settling of floodwaters coming off this whole thing. They're so disingenuous in their beliefs and what they're talking about, and they just keep throwing it at you and gish galloping and everything. It's enough to drive someone fucking insane. If they didn't have any kind of inkling about what's going on in the real world, and if you were raised in this kind of thing, you would think, oh my God, they're right. All of these things that they're listing, how could they possibly be wrong? They've been wrong about just about every fucking sentence that they've said this entire time. and it's hurting my brain to listen to it anymore. How anybody like Paul Logia listens to this week in and week out and comes up with videos on this stuff. I mean, I don't mind talking shit about Ken Ham and his ilk because they fucking deserve it. But usually I'm doing it out of a place of love for the people that are being hurt in the communities and everything. Man, I could not sit here and watch 34 minutes of this goddamn show that he has on here, and we've probably sat through at least 4 or 5 minutes of this. And Paul is a great guy. He actually treats people very nicely, a whole lot nicer than I possibly could. Man, it's ridiculous. Well, that's all I got. Happy Thanksgiving in the past. Sorry, it's Friday. You don't want to hear about all that shit. Anyway, we're going to catch you next week with a bunch of new episodes, a whole bunch of new stuff going on. Felicia's still gone for the week next week, so it's just going to be Kyle, myself, and whoever else I can rope into doing this again. Maybe Brian. Brian was a good co-host this week. I really like that guy. Anyway, you guys have a good weekend. We'll see you.